Just ignore my stuff, have your stuff on top. Yeah, they've been coming for a while. Okay. She actually came into the phone call. That was good. I can't think of her name. Eddie knows her name. Okay, good, good.
Good afternoon and welcome to First Congregational Church of Norman UCC, where no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We see the faithful got out and none of us melted in the rain so far, and it does look like in the next couple of days it's going to be a little bit cool, so watch yourselves in the morning so you don't slip and fall. But we're glad that you made it out this afternoon, and there may be some folks who are joining us at home as well. As far as announcements, as a reminder, and it's always on the back here, and as a reminder, we always are accepting clean styrofoam containers. If you'll bring them out here or put them in the church office, we'll make sure that those get recycled. That's one of the things that Norman doesn't take up, and we have a place that we do with I believe it's the Lutheran Church here that does those, so we're appreciative of the ability to do that. A couple of other announcements. One is that Ruth Blake had her surgery on Thursday evening, her back surgery. She's doing well. She's home. Visited with her by text yesterday afternoon. We saw her in the hospital on Friday. She was doing, I thought, remarkably well. She was having a little bit of trouble with, pain medications and getting all that worked out, but seems to have that under control. When I visited with her yesterday, she was had a nice long nap, she said, and she's feeling fine. We have several people lined up to take her meals. If we need more assistance, we'll let the Circle of Care team know, but that's a real good entryway, a segue into the plug for Tear This Off. If you have anyone that you know of that needs Circle of Care assistance, there's a place for you to do that. And we have a card for Ruth that's back here on the lectern in the loggia, just to let her know that we're thinking about her and sending her good get well wishes and that she has a quick recovery. Are there other announcements that for the good of the church that need to be made? Dale? All right. Well, thank you for the update on Sally. Sally, one of our homebound members who Dale and others visit on a regular basis, and she's doing well, waiting for a wheelchair. And then Dale's reminding us it is time for, if you haven't already done it, I've already done mine, get your RSV, your flu shot, your COVID shot, all those kinds of vaccines. We're fortunate that we have the ability to get those. I think for most people, it's covered by your insurance or by Medicare or by something. I don't know that there's anybody who has to pay out of pocket. I know the health department gives those for free, but most places like CVS, Walgreens, other places have clinics for that. And it really is important to stay as healthy as we can as we get into this time of the year when a lot of stuff is going around. So thank you, Dale, for that reminder. Okay, if there are no other announcements, we'll move into the time of joys and concerns. As a reminder, for our joys, we say thanks be to God, and for our concerns, or those things that may be heavy on our heart, we lift them up and say, God, hear our prayer. So, does anyone have a joy or a concern that they'd like to lift up today? Dale? I'm sorry, what? Okay, great. Robin, great to have you back. And we do welcome you here. He is going to, I'm sure, update us on how things went this past week in his life. I know, I guess we would say, thanks be to God, right? Let's say it together. We lift up Robin's return and we say, thanks be to God. Or if there are no other joys or concerns that anyone has, we'll go to the ringing of the bell. Ring this 3 times. It's a time for centering, and a lot of times people will go, well, why do we ring a bell? Why do we do this? It's a time for us to clear our minds, to bring our thoughts, and to kind of wind down from the week. Think about the joys and concerns that maybe people have lifted up. Think about others in the church and the congregation. So I ask you to listen to this as I ring it 3 times. Now, if you would, please join in the call to worship. And as we look to the hymn that's listed here, it is something different. So it is 436. We'll be singing God of Grace and God of Glory following the call to worship, number 436. I'll remind you as we finish our call to worship. I'll read the light print, and if you would say back to me the bold print, it would be appreciated. To know the warmth of love.
To have the assurance that someone cares.
To be confident of our worth.
To be bold to love in return.
To be washed over with grace.
To be accepted as we are.
This is to know the divine mystery.
Then let us worship in spirit and in truth.
And if you're able, please stand in body or in spirit, and we'll sing number 436, God of Grace and God of Glory.
Please be seated. Thank you for singing the Changed hymn. That hymn was composed by Harry Emerson Fosdick, who was the first minister of the Riverside Church in New York City, across the street from probably the most famous Protestant seminary in America, Union Theological Seminary, where Paul Tillich and Reinhold Niebuhr and other people taught. And I am picking hymns that have something to do with the sadness we are feeling about the war. And in particular, verse 3, cure your children's warring madness, bend our pride to your control. Let's bow our heads together. Lord of life, we grieve for those suffering around the world, for those killed in terrorist attacks, and for those killed in response to those attacks. We grieve for those who have been persecuted for centuries, and for those whose persecution has led them to persecute others, until violence begets violence without end. So we gather here feeling helpless and yet rejecting silence. Though it may seem futile, we lift a prayer in a moment of crisis for the people we love, both Israelis and Palestinians, as we recognize the ways in which we are all complicit in these ancient hatreds. But we will not stop asking the question that must be asked: whose children are more valuable? Whose security is more important? Whose land is more sacred? Whose God is the one true God? If the answers are that all children matter, that everyone needs security, that land is precious and must not be stolen, and that arguments over who is the one true God are the ultimate insult to the very idea of the one true God, then we must not withdraw into moral apathy or timid speech. Moments like this test the very meaning of faith, or they collapse into partisan simplicities that allow empires to continue their domination over the powerless. Followers of the way of Jesus, the Jew from Palestine, don't have the luxury of righteous indignation without moral imagination. We must stand with everyone, but not with everything that anyone does. We take our clue from a penniless rabbi from Nazareth, and then we ask ourselves the biggest question of them all: what would Jesus be telling us today? And with whom would he identify? Perhaps with the children, no matter what branch of the family tree they come from. Lord, have mercy. And please join me now in praying the Lord's Prayer that is printed in your bulletin. Our Creator, who is in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Do not let us fall into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For you reign in the power that is love, now and always. Amen.
One quick announcement before we get to the music. We're going to be switching the Spiegel and Spiegel with the cello solo, and I wanted to speak a little bit about the cello solo. I'm playing the second movement of Jack Kilpatrick's solo cello suite for solo cello and company. Jack Kilpatrick is a charity composer. He taught at OU and SMU for a little bit. The Philharmonic here has recently been playing his music at
Thank you, Keegan. I'm going to read the text that was the lectionary passage for last Sunday when I wasn't here, because I'd already gotten to work on a sermon, and just don't throw sermons away, you can't do that. And this is a text that is of great interest to all of us around the middle of April every year. It's called The Question About Paying Taxes. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Here ends this reading inspired by God. May God grant to us wisdom and courage for interpretation. I think this is the first time that I've heard the rain on this roof since I've been coming down here to preach to you guys. It's a lovely sound, and I actually love rainy days myself. I would be okay living in Seattle. Now let me begin by saying, my dear friends, thank you so much for your kindness to me during my time away with COVID. I had dodged that bullet since the pandemic began and thought perhaps that I might never get it. But like so many other people I know lately, crowded airplanes and crowded airports are risky. And after long flights to and from Plattsburgh, New York, and that's a long flight both ways, where I'd gone to lecture and preach in a Methodist church, I joined the COVID club, but I joined it with some of the nicest people I know. And thank you so much, by the way, for the lovely card that you sent and all your well wishes. I turned it over and upside down and read every message and tried to figure out who in the world is this. But it was lovely. It is wonderful when the pastor gets a card from the congregation. I'm going to preach on this text because Jesus gets put on the hot seat here about paying taxes, and as he often did when facing those who sought to bring him down, he turned the tables and slipped away and left everyone muttering, "How did he do that?" I wanted to go ahead and preach on this text, which, as I said, which was the lectionary passage last Sunday, because I believe it is one of the most tragically misunderstood scriptures in the New Testament. The shorthand for which is a sort of hermeneutical crime. Render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. Who has not heard this? We've all heard this. Sadly, this has led countless Christians to have a dichotomous relationship to government, as if the words of Jesus established two separate realms on earth, Caesar's and God's, and that people should just render unto each what each requires. In America, this seems particularly obvious given our efforts to keep church and state separate, which has been, and let's hope will continue to be, one of the saving graces of our republic. As I have often written about, we don't just need freedom of religion, we need freedom from religion. This has helped to keep the peace in a world of never-ending sectarian violence. But as it turns out, in their historical context, these words of Jesus have very little to do with taxation or our modern obligations toward the IRS. To begin with, first century Jews paid numerous taxes, a tithe to the temple, customs taxes, and taxes on land. But when the Pharisees and the Herodians put Jesus to the test, they were not talking about any of those. They were talking about what was called the tribute, which was a special tax paid to Caesar. Caesar, the emperor of Rome, head of the imperial domination system that had ruled the Jewish homeland for 6 decades before the birth of Jesus. It ruled through client kings, such as Herod and his sons, and Roman governors. And Herod is, of course, where the Herodians get their name, so their loyalty is obvious. It was set up to serve the elites, this system, who served it back. Most of the good farms in that rocky and arid part of the world were owned by these elites, in much the same way corporations own most of the agricultural industry in America now. And then, as now, between crushing debt and little profit going to those who actually worked the land, 90% of the population barely got by. It was grinding poverty in the constant shadow of starvation. Not surprisingly, temple authorities and their retainers collaborated with Roman rule, and they endorsed the tax. They benefited from it. But Jews sympathetic to the resistance to Rome rejected it. However, they knew that to act on such resistance by refusing to pay the tax was the equivalent of sedition. So it's a trap, as the text reveals from the outset. Quote, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said, as do so many lawyers who seek to entrap someone on the witness stand. The questions are often put in the form that requires a yes or no answer. And in this case, for Jesus, either answer would have disastrous consequences. This I'll try to explain in a moment. But first, how about the way they begin to lay down this trap? They begin with an effusive compliment, a time-honored rhetorical strategy also known as damning with faint praise. Teacher, they say, we know you are sincere and teach the ways of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. So, tell us then, O great wise one, what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? Now, today we would begin by saying, that's a great question, which I wish people would stop saying. Because, let's face it, they knew they had him, and he knew that they had him. Here's why. If he says yes, it is lawful to pay the tribute to Caesar, Jesus loses credibility with those who found the tribute reprehensible and oppressive. That is, with the Jewish prophetic resistance of which Jesus is perceived to be a champion, like the great brown hope. For that crowd, to the left of Jesus, if you will, this would be a cowardly answer, and he would lose his prophetic credentials. But if he said no, it is not lawful to pay the tax to Caesar, the Roman authorities would have arrived in about 2 minutes to arrest him. There may even have been a tax collector in the room taking notes, or sort of a mole, wearing a wire to make this contemporary, and sending the words of Jesus to Roman stooges in a van parked down the street. You see, there is no good answer, not even a better one. It's a trap. And so Jesus, who once counseled making our words a simple yes or no, cannot follow his own advice here. So he gives his own trick answer to a trick question. Aware of their malice, he said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." They bring him a coin, a denarius. He looks at it and says, "Whose image and inscription is this?" Well, of course, he knows the answer. He's looking at it. The coin was stamped with the image of Caesar, presumably Tiberius, and an inscription that read, "Son of the divine Augustus." That is, son of a divine being. Remember, all the Caesars were thought to be divine and born of virgins, which is why the gospel writers flipped the script and said Jesus was the true Son of God and he was born of a virgin. This idea that the Caesars were sons of God, the image of the divine on earth, would, of course, constitute idolatry, the first sin of the Ten Commandments, and so it would have offended any observant Jew. Now he is set to utter that famous, but I believe wildly misunderstood line. Render unto Caesars the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. It is misunderstood because it is so ambiguous. The word render means give back. So maybe all he is saying is, it's Caesar's to begin with, so go ahead and give it back to him. Or maybe he just means to say that we should pay the tribute to Caesar and the temple tax to God, as when we pay our taxes to the Pax Americana, but make our pledge to support our particular house of worship, like First Congregational Church Norman. Or, and this strikes me as a real possibility, given that Jesus was a subversive, perhaps what he is asking indirectly is this: what really belongs to Caesar? The answer: nothing. What really belongs to God? The answer: everything. So, although both tax advocates and anti-tax crusaders have used this passage to support their position, the more intriguing question is, where should our true loyalty lie? Because what if Caesar is Hitler, or apartheid, or totalitarianism, or predatory capitalism? Remember, the empire has many guises. What if Caesar is Big Pharma, aka America's legal drug lords? What if it is big oil and gas? What if it is the American-Israeli military-industrial juggernaut? Everyone is so busy demanding that we pick a side in this horrific war between Israel and Gaza and Hamas that they have forgotten that just as we failed to learn after 9/11, terrorism does not exist in a vacuum, and it cannot be eradicated like a disease. If the system that creates terrorists remains in place or gets worse, the terrorists will always regroup and wait to strike again. So the question that people of conscience must answer is not, do you stand with Israel, yes or no? Or do you stand with Palestine, yes or no? But rather, what should be the attitude of any compassionate person toward domination systems, whether they are ancient or modern? Fast forward a couple thousand years to the life of the American empire, where not long ago, following the murder of George Floyd, a man of color who happened to be one of our modern gladiators, his name was Colin Kaepernick, decided to kneel during the anthem as a form of nonviolent protest, one of the most cherished and profoundly constitutional of all American activities. He kneeled to express his grief at what is happening to people of color at the hands of police. The response of the empire was swift, since the non-payment of this patriotic tribute was seen on television and condemned immediately by the man who would be Caesar, Donald Trump, as a sign of disrespect for the flag and thus the godly empire. Ironically, many veterans weighed in that their sacrifice was made in part to guarantee the right to such peaceful protests. But Caesar Trump was not amused because, above all else, Caesars demand loyalty. So rather than talk about the crisis of what was happening to brown and black bodies, many fans sitting in the modern version of the Colosseum condemned the protest and told Kaepernick to get the hell out of the country. They called him a traitor to the faith, an interesting choice of words. When our Caesar-elect called the protesters sons of bitches and, recalling his reality TV days, said they should be fired, hundreds more gladiators decided to start kneeling during the national anthem. Hold on to that thought, church. So that this was the oddly familiar-sounding question that preoccupied our country. Is it lawful to kneel during the national anthem or not? That's a trap. If we answer yes, even if the action is respectful and nonviolent, well, then we are labeled unpatriotic and disrespectful. If we answer no, we are putting flag and country above God and conscience, no matter how bad things get. The original idea of kneeling came to Kaepernick and his teammate Eric Brown as a way of protesting respectfully. They even compared it to flying the flag at half-staff when something tragic happens. I find it odd that Caesar thinks kneeling to the flag during the playing of the national anthem is a disrespectful act. Throughout the ages, don't you know, kneeling has been a sign of respect. One kneels to be knighted, one kneels to propose marriage, one kneels to pray in a house of worship. Some would say that kneeling shows more respect than standing. Of course, blind allegiance to one's country, regardless of what is actually going on in one's country, is one form of patriotism. My country, right or wrong. But kneeling is a way of saying that we love the ideals of this country, but we grieve our failures to live up to them. Have we so soon forgotten that nothing is more American than loving your country by protesting the king, removing him from power and giving it back to the people? Consider this: 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses do not salute the flag. They consider it idolatry. 200,000 Amish don't stand for the national anthem. Some Quakers will not recite the Pledge of Allegiance because their highest allegiance lies elsewhere. But one black man kneels in silent, respectful protest, and all hell breaks loose. I pay taxes because they are the dues necessary to have a civilization, even though I often protest the way the money is spent. It is possible to regard paying taxes as a duty, but no less of a duty is being a citizen who, like the early Jesus people, prays for Caesar but not to Caesar. Paying taxes is a duty. Being a citizen is an even higher one. So here's the balancing act that this moment we are living through requires. We are not directed by Jesus to withdraw from our responsibilities as citizens. We are told to have even higher loyalties, however, than paying our dues and then neglecting to act on our faith. One of the early and dangerous marks of being a Christian in the ancient world was our refusal to worship more than one God. Caesar is Kyrios, said Rome, meaning Caesar is Lord. No, only the Lord is Lord, said the Jesus people. We will pray for Caesar, but not to him. Caesar is Son of God, said Rome. No, said the people of the way, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Caesar is Pontifex Maximus, said Rome, meaning Caesar is the high priest. Wrong again, said the early followers of the Anointed One. Jesus is our high priest, and he has ended the age of sacrifice by revealing a God of love who does not demand it. It was based on this text, this very text, that I began over 2 decades ago traveling around, speaking in churches and telling them to consider removing the American flag from their sanctuaries, which met with very different and interesting responses. And I said, just consider putting them anywhere else, in the church, on the lawn, just not in the space that's set aside as a house of prayer for all people. Sanctuaries should be gun-free zones also, because our addiction to guns is a demonic form of idolatry. Then we need to recover our pacifist roots, which will get the empire's attention like nothing else. I can promise you that the most threatening movement inside Israel these days is a group called Jews for Peace. That is a threat, who are calling for an end to the siege of Gaza and an end to the military occupation, the illegal settlements, and the refusal to work toward a two-state solution that led to the horrific attacks of October 7th. I want to do what I can to support the work of Jews for Peace, since Jesus was a Jew for peace, as far as I can tell. And from Palestine, don't you know, because the white-hot center of the gospel is, as I have said so many times that it must be annoying to you by now, either all of us matter or none of us do. When we demand blind allegiance to gods of our own making, no matter what is happening in our streets, in our homes, in our schools, we mock the faith we sit in church to proclaim. Let's not blame the messenger for revealing our brokenness, our systemic racism, or our addiction to greed, as well as opioids. We are not a Christian nation. We are not a Christian nation. We are a profoundly Roman one. And it's time we all took a knee. Miriam Therese Winter wrote some new words to a beloved patriotic hymn, and I think it's a good way to close. Indigenous and immigrant, our daughters and our sons, oh, may we never rest content till all are truly one. America, America, God grant that we may be a sisterhood and brotherhood from sea to shining sea. How beautiful, sincere lament, the wisdom born of tears, the courage called for to repent the bloodshed through the years. America, America, God grant that we may be a nation blessed with none oppressed, true land of liberty. You see, that's how the church that once gave the empire fits can still make this empire fitful. So, go in peace, pray for peace, wage a little peace, and love one another. Every single other. Amen. I don't know how you guys do it every time, but that was absolutely the perfect musical selection for this moment. And I want to share with you all, I've tested negative for COVID. I'm going to put the mask on when I come back down into the congregation just to be on the safe side. But I, of course, had a doctor, and I have insurance, and so I was able to get on Paxlovid immediately. So I am one of the privileged few in the world who could recover very quickly from this, and I have to never forget that. And I also wanted to let you all know that Ahmad and Chasi, our favorite imam ever in the world, has lost multiple family members in Gaza. And he's been posting on Facebook one post that said, I have run out of tears, and another today that showed sort of a Madonna and child figure superimposed over the ruins of Gaza, the absolute ruins of Gaza. So if you want a way to think about this concretely, think of Ahmad, my colleague at the university, and your good friend. And he sends his love, and I will send your love back to him. And now for the work of this church, this community, and throughout the only world we have, let us bring our gifts and our tithes and our pledges. Will the ushers please come forward to receive our morning offering and our little slips of paper from the bulletin.